You ever watch a woman commit grand theft rinse in a Chanel suit? I have, and I designed the nozzle she used to do it. That Wednesday morning, my garage turned into the opening scene of a legal drama sponsored by Karma. Soap suds, high heels, and one Porsche Targa in the wrong place at the worst time. There she stood, Veronica Dalton, president of the Bellflower Point HOA and the unchallenged empress of lawn ordinances, mid-screech, mid-wash, mid-felony. The same woman who fined me $200 0 cents for leaving a rake out for 45 minutes. Now here she was, in my garage, trespassing, stealing water, and spraying her German import with what she assumed was a high-tech, eco-friendly rinse. What she didn't know? She was using Blend B, my special formula, designed for violators with entitlement issues. Hint, it didn't smell like lemon drop. A comment below telling me where you're watching from, because what happened next in my garage is going to have your jaw on the floor. Back it up 3 weeks. I was 40, freshly divorced, and more than ready for a fresh start that didn't involve lawyers, scented candles, or arguing about brunch reservations. I bought a home in Bellflower Point. Quiet, neat, predictable. Everything down to the mailboxes matched like it had been planned by a retired wedding planner with OCD. I picked the last house on the cul-de-sac, great trees, detached garage, and enough space to build a water recycling car wash system in my own backyard. Because that's my thing. I design eco-smart systems for high-end clients. I'd work with vineyards, museums, even a couple of airports. But what I didn't know when I signed the papers was that Bellflower Point didn't just have property lines. It had personality lines. And the HOA? That was less association and more polished dictatorship. Run, of course, by a woman whose pearls were tighter than her bylaws. It started small. A paper slip tucked into my front door. Violation, garage paint color not approved. I'd painted the door gray, because I like gray. Apparently Veronica didn't. Next came lawn nonconformity, edging exceeds boundary, then a handwritten note about excessive humming during my evening walks. I thought it was satire. It wasn't. Dave, my neighbor, called it the HOA gauntlet. You move in, you get tested. If you comply, you get to mow your grass in peace. If you push back, you get the full Veronica experience. Clipboards, citations, and driveway photo apps. I tried to stay under the radar, but when I saw her inspecting my recycling bin from the street with opera glasses, I decided it was time to document. I logged every visit, every notice, and every sideways comment. I wasn't going to fight her with rage. I was going to fight her with data. Then came the welcome party. Think country club meets group therapy. With finger food. That's where I first met her face to face. Bright yellow sundress, pearls the size of grapes, and a smile so forced it could have doubled as dental floss. "Mr. Taylor," she said like it hurt her tongue, "I trust you've reviewed our regulations." I nodded, and I had, and I'd already spotted her biggest oversight. The HOA banned outdoor car washing due to runoff, but said nothing about enclosed systems. My setup in the garage? Compliant. Interesting interpretation, she sniffed, but we care about the spirit of the rules, not just the letter. Spirit? Lady, I'm an engineer. If it's not in writing, it doesn't exist. That was the moment the battle line was drawn. I was no longer just a homeowner. I was the guy who wouldn't bow to Veronica of Versailles. After that, it got real. Daily emails, multiple violation notices, including one for aggressive plant growth. I kid you not, she said my hydrangeas looked rebellious, but I wasn't rattled. I was prepping. I reinforced my garage with a smart lock system, motion sensors, and 4 discrete cameras, and then I added Plan B, a hidden valve system that could switch water sources with a tap on my phone. One was filtered rainwater. The other? Let's just say it was sourced from the kind of places that make your nose file a restraining order. I labeled it non-potable, test only, and left the garage just cracked enough for curiosity to do its thing. I didn't know when Veronica would take the bait, but I knew she couldn't resist the temptation forever. And when she did, well, she'd leave my garage with more than just a cleaner car. She'd leave with consequences. You ever get a bill so ridiculous you think it's satire, until you realize it's real and signed in cursive? That was me on a Tuesday opening the latest HOA violation slip like it was a chocolate truffle box from hell. Veronica had outdone herself, a $125.00 fine for my lawn being 0.2 inches too tall, accompanied by a helpful note comparing my grass to a visually disruptive carpet of rebellion. There was even a chart. I didn't know HOA officials carried calipers. Next up was a $75.00 citation for garage facade incongruity, apparently because my garage door had a matte finish that projected an industrial tone. You'd think I'd welded an oil rig in there. But the pièce de résistance? A $200.00 fine for unapproved water usage, because apparently water inside a closed garage counts as a public spectacle. That one came with a passive-aggressive warning. Continued violations may result in formal proceedings. What, like the Inquisition? I needed help, not just any help, the kind of help that doesn't flinch when someone says subsection B17. That's when I met Rita Park, 37, sharp suit, sharper mind, and the only woman I've ever met who could describe a municipal code violation like she was reciting poetry. She lived 3 streets over and had been fined for growing the wrong kind of hydrangeas twice. Too ruffled, the citation read. I told her that sounded like something a sommelier would say. She didn't laugh, just pulled out a binder labeled Veronica's Greatest Hits and flipped to a page that said in highlighter, Hydrangea Discrimination Case Law. When I explained my setup, her eyes lit up like I'd just offered her a search warrant and a latte. We're going to need digital folders, time-stamped records, and a lot of cold coffee, she said. Because what you've got isn't just a bad neighbor, it's regulatory sadism. Enter Officer Marcus Dale, local patrolman, big shoulders, kind eyes, and a long memory. Veronica once filed a complaint against him for patrolling too visibly in his cruiser, said the flashing lights during a stolen bike incident were agitating to residents. Marcus, to his credit, didn't arrest her for wasting oxygen. Instead, he quietly started documenting. Been building a file of my own, he told us, flipping open his dash-mount tablet. Let's just say her HOA fines read like a tasting menu of tyranny. He was in. Just like that, the trio was born, me, Rita, and Marcus, armed with legal insight, official records, and the kind of collective exhaustion that turns frustration into precision. We created a shared folder titled Operation Queen Drain. The goal? Document every overstep, every lie, and every lavender-scented violation Veronica tried to pass off as community harmony. And the best part, she had no clue her empire was being audited from the inside out. The more we dug, the more rotten the perfume bottle started to smell. Veronica loved to present herself as the guardian of elegance, but what we uncovered looked less like rules and more like control disguised as taste. Her favorite HOA phrases, community aesthetic, shared tranquility, visual cohesion, were used like blunt objects. Fines for fence slats facing the wrong way, warnings for wind chimes being too whimsical. One poor guy got a notice because his solar lights interfered with lunar ambiance. It wasn't an HOA, it was Versailles, with better irrigation, and she ruled it like a duchess with a personal grudge against fun. Rita said it best. She thinks she's Chanel No. 5, but this entire operation smells like unleaded. We started cross-referencing the most egregious fines. Nearly all went to newer residents, especially ones with tech backgrounds, legal training, or, in Marcus's case, badges. In other words, people who might push back. That wasn't enforcement, that was intimidation. While the folder grew, so did my plan. I wasn't just going to fight back, I was going to let Veronica walk into her own mess, dressed in heels and hubris. I installed a new trigger on the car wash system hidden under the workbench that let me switch from my regular rinse to the special blend. Imagine eau de compost mixed with garlic foot scrub, non-toxic, biodegradable, but memorable. I labeled it Maintenance Mode, Do Not Use, and left the garage just cracked enough to tempt a certain rule-obsessed intruder. And because I don't play amateur hour with evidence, I upgraded the security feed to 4K, motion-activated, cloud-backed, and synced to both my phone and Rita's. If Veronica decided to snoop again, and something told me she wouldn't just be washing her car. She'd be scrubbing her reputation clean with a toothbrush and tears. She thought she ruled with elegance, but her HOA was a perfume bottle full of gasoline. And the match? That was already lit. You ever see someone commit a crime with the confidence of a cat knocking things off a counter, like they truly believe rules don't apply to them? That's how Veronica looked the morning she snuck into my garage. It was subtle at first. Just a flicker on the motion cam, a shadow moving past the side of my workshop. But then, there she was, in full high-definition glory, squeezing her way through the cracked garage door like an HOA raccoon with a designer purse. Her hair was coiffed, her heels were impractical, and her expression? Pure entitlement wrapped in Chanel. I watched from my security feed as she scanned the space, eyes darting to the car wash system like she'd stumbled onto forbidden treasure. The woman who fined me for overzealous lawn trimming was about to become Exhibit A in her own downfall. And that made me smile wider than a sprinkler in July. Her Porsche, normally blindingly white, looked like it had lost a fight with a pine tree in a pollen storm. She eased it into my wash bay with all the caution of someone who's breaking the rules, but thinks the universe owes her a free pass. The cameras caught everything. Her peeking at the instructions I'd helpfully left behind, pressing the touchscreen like she owned the patent, even adjusting her sunglasses for a mid-wash selfie. I'd never seen someone so smug while trespassing. It was like watching someone rob a bank and stop for a glamour shot with the Volt. And the best part? Just as she pressed Start Wash, I activated Scent Protocol X from my phone, my environmentally friendly, non-damaging, absolutely nose-melting special rinse. Think compost tea meets Jim Locker's stew. By the time the second cycle kicked in, her luxury SUV was being lovingly bathed in eau de regret. At first, she didn't notice. The rinse looked the same, clear, foamy, perfectly engineered to disguise its true identity until it dried. But then came the smell. It crept in like a rude dinner guest. Slow, uninvited, and impossible to ignore. You could see it happen on the footage, her nose twitching, her brows furrowing, that precise moment when her face shifted from smug to stunned. She sniffed her sleeve, then the air, then the mist dancing across her hood. It was the olfactory equivalent of a lie detector test, and Veronica was failing miserably. I watched as she scrambled to shut off the system, only to hit the intensive wax cycle instead. The woman who fined people for flower bed color had just turned her Porsche into a public compost bin. If irony had a scent, it smelled like her exhaust pipe that day. I timed my return perfectly, pulled into the driveway just as she opened the garage door, gagging and flapping her arms like she'd fought a skunk and lost. "Oh, hey, Mrs. Cunningham," I called out casually, stepping out of my truck like it was just another Tuesday. Her eyes widened like saucers, caught between confrontation and collapse. "What are you doing in my garage?" I asked, not angry, just curious, like someone wondering why a raccoon is wearing lipstick. She stammered something about, HOA inspections and community safety, but the stench was doing all the talking now. Her car smelled like wet compost got dumped in a sauna. Her designer blouse clung to her like punishment. And her story? It unraveled faster than lawn sod on a windy day. "Interesting," I said, pointing to the sign taped beside the control panel. "You see that? Test in progress. Experimental water system. Use at your own risk." "Kinda hard to miss, don't you think?" She tried to play it off, muttering something about not seeing it, which was hilarious considering she'd taken selfies standing right beside it. "Also," I continued, gesturing to the blinking red lights on my security cams, "we've got full footage of the entry, the wash, the selfies, and the moment the smell hit. You might want to save the footage. It's Oscar weather." She froze. No backup script, no exit strategy, just her swamp-scented Porsche, and a digital trail of her downfall preserved in 4K clarity. And I hadn't even gotten to the part about pressing charges yet. She left, smelling like a swamp. But what lingered longer was what she did wrong, and what she'd just handed me wasn't a complaint. It was evidence, the kind that even HOA bylaws couldn't scrub clean. What comes next, let's just say the fragrance of karma lasts longer than any perfume, and it was about to waft through every corner of Cedar Bluff. You'll want to stick around for that. You ever seen someone try to rewrite history while the whole town's still holding the receipts? That was Veronica at the emergency HOA meeting she called 2 days after the, let's say, fragrant Porsche incident. She strutted into the clubhouse like a pageant queen entering a courtroom, decked out in a silk suit that still couldn't mask the faint eau de compost trailing behind her. She opened the meeting by accusing me, yes, me, of ecological sabotage. Claimed I'd poured toxic chemicals into the HOA pond in the dead of night, said she had proof. And then, like some villain pulling a VHS tape from her purse in a courtroom drama, she played a grainy night vision video of someone who kinda looked like me dumping something from a canister near the water. Problem was, I wasn't there. And the only thing more artificial than that video was her cheek filler. The room got quiet. The kind of quiet that happens when people aren't sure if they're watching an HOA meeting or the trailer for a bad crime docuseries. Veronica smirked like she'd landed a checkmate, chin high, arms folded, fully expecting a chorus of gasps and calls for my banishment. But see, here's the thing about being a smart home engineer with a minor obsession for digital redundancy. I don't just secure my home, I digitally fingerprint it. I waited for her to finish her big performance, then calmly connected my laptop to the projector and said, "Let's take a look at what actually happened that night." What followed was a real-time, blockchain-stamped, time-stamped, verified security feed of me giving a keynote presentation at a water tech summit in Phoenix, miles away, with flight logs, hotel key swipes, and a live Q&A video stream to match. The only thing I'd poured that day was coffee. You could feel the temperature shift in the room, not from anger, but from doubt. Veronica's supporters didn't walk out, but they stopped clapping. I watched as a few board members exchanged side eyes like two kids caught cheating off each other's math test. Then came the whispers. Quiet, but growing. And right on cue, the treasurer's seat creaked. Miriam Patel, former HOA treasurer and local tax preparer legend, stood up and cleared her throat like someone getting ready to finally sing the note they've been holding for too long. "I resigned last year," she said, "because I couldn't get a straight answer about where $118,000 went from our landscaping fund." Her voice didn't crack. Her hands didn't shake. She wasn't angry. She was done. And done people are more dangerous than mad ones because they don't want a fight. They want facts. That's when I knew. The wind was starting to blow in a different direction. I pulled up my final slide deck and said, "Let's talk about numbers." Not feelings, not flowers, not fountains, just raw, verifiable numbers. My algorithm, a little side project I built after noticing some funny charges on my own dues, had tracked 5 years of vendor payments, budget changes, and maintenance invoices. And guess what? They formed a constellation of red flags large enough to guide ships by, we were looking at over $500,000 that had either disappeared into thin air or gotten funneled through 3 different shell companies, all of which were, surprise, connected to Veronica's cousin's contracting firm. She said it was oversight, I told the room. We showed it was overcharged. The screen lit up with flowcharts, vendor logs, and board approvals bearing her signature. It wasn't dramatic, it was surgical, and you could feel the room tipping, not with applause, but with awareness. Because once the curtain drops, people stop clapping, they start questioning. By the time I closed my laptop, you could hear a sprinkler ticking from across the street. Veronica was still at the front of the room, mouth open, looking like she'd just realized the punch bowl was spiked, and she was the only one still drinking. Her power wasn't on paper, it was duct-taped to fear, and the tape was peeling. Her last attempt at damage control, a vague warning about legal consequences for defamation and digital tampering. But when I offered to hand over all files to the county fraud division, she suddenly remembered a prior engagement. And just like that, The queen, who once ruled with fines and flowers, had stepped into a trap she didn't even smell coming. The real story wasn't just that her car stank. It was that her whole empire did too. And next, well, the scent was starting to reach the state attorney's office. Stick around. The cleanup crew hasn't even arrived yet. There's something oddly poetic about watching corruption unravel on a 32-inch monitor over lukewarm coffee and a Costco muffin. That's how our alliance, me, Rita the legal eagle, Officer Marcus, and Judy the ex-HOA treasurer with a memory like a steel trap, spent our Saturday morning. Not in protest, not in panic, just calmly, quietly, digitally tearing Veronica Dalton's fiefdom to shreds, one Excel tab at a time. What we uncovered wasn't just incompetence, it was precision sabotage disguised as suburban order. And for once, HOA didn't stand for Homeowners Association, it stood for her other agenda. Judy had kept backups of everything from her time on the board, emails, vendor contracts, and even sticky notes from Veronica with passive-aggressive reminders to avoid transparency overload, her words, not ours. We plugged the data into a program I designed, Audit Hydra, because every financial head we cut off seemed to grow two more. Patterns emerged. Repeated invoice amounts, same contractor name under different addresses, and every major repair or landscaping job over $5,000, 0 cents. It all led back to companies with one name in common, Hank Dalton, Veronica's older brother, listed as an operations consultant. I don't know about you, but if my sibling starts getting paid $90,000, 0 cents for pressure washing sidewalks, we're due for a family intervention. The real kicker was the timeline. Every time HOA dues increased, every single time, there was a matching spike in payments to Dalton Link vendors. You could almost set your watch to the corruption. It was like Veronica used the HOA budget as her personal monopoly board, except she skipped go and collected $200, 0 cents directly from our checking accounts. Her empire wasn't on paper. It was duct tape to fear, and the duct tape? It was peeling, baby. We printed it all. Giant flowcharts with arrows looping from HOA coffers to shell companies, then disappearing into P.O. boxes and consulting firms with no websites. Rita called it corporate origami. Everything folded just right so it looked official until you unfolded it. Officer Marcus reviewed each contract with the eyes of a man who's been ticketed for parking his squad car too visibly and now had receipts to show who was really disturbing the neighborhood. You know, he said, flipping through one vendor agreement, I've arrested people for fraud with less documentation than this. The only thing she didn't do was sign it in glitter pen. Once we had the full fraud tree mapped, I did what any engineer with a grudge and good Wi-Fi would do. I animated it. A full-color visual breakdown of the HOA's corruption, with dollars flowing like a crooked river into Hank's pockets. We kept the design simple. Green for legit payments, red for suspicious ones, and gold for outright theft. The screen looked like a Christmas crime scene. It wasn't just numbers anymore. It was a story, and people don't ignore stories when they're told with color and contempt. Word started spreading, quietly at first. A neighbor dropped off a manila envelope filled with old violation notices and handwritten notes. Another brought a USB stick with years of newsletters and audio recordings from board meetings. One woman brought a photo of her unapproved mailbox that had cost her $150, 0 cents in fines, and it was identical to Veronica's. The dam was cracking. What started as Gavin versus HOA was now neighborhood versus Queen Veronica. And trust me, the pitchforks weren't far behind, just waiting for PowerPoint. At the emergency meeting, called by Judy, not Veronica, residents packed the community center like it was bingo night with cash prizes. The vibe was different. Nobody was smiling, not even the cookie moms. Veronica strutted in wearing a sharp-shouldered lavender blazer and her signature icy grin, still under the delusion that a clipboard could block incoming subpoenas. She barely made it to the podium before Judy hit play on the projector. The animation began. The audience leaned forward, and so did Veronica. right into the biggest ambush of her tenure. There's something delightful about watching someone realize they're not the hunter anymore. The lines on the screen told a story no speech could counter. $512,684.00 in diverted funds, all routed through companies Hank Dalton either owned, operated, or set up through an anonymous incorporation service in Delaware. It was so transparent even the projector blushed. Rita laid out the legal implications, calmly explaining what constituted racketeering and fiduciary abuse. Officer Marcus confirmed the HOA code violations, and I just watched Veronica shrink in real time, shoulders drooping, arms crossed, that famous smirk cracking like old vinyl. Residents gasped, some whispered, others murmured things I can't repeat on a family-friendly channel. Then someone yelled, "What about the playground fund?" And just like that, the room turned into a courtroom. Every fine, every letter, every unjustified increase was now up for public cross-examination. It was less a meeting and more a reckoning. Judy handed out copies of the audit summary, complete with footnotes, sources, and backup evidence. We'd done our homework, and it showed. That night, we forwarded everything, flowcharts, vendor lists, bank transfers, and affidavit statements, to the district attorney. We didn't ask for action, we presented a case that demanded it. By midnight, we got the receipt confirmation. Subpoenas were pending. Veronica's carefully controlled HOA kingdom, propped up by silence and symmetrical hedges, was now under investigation by people who didn't care how nice her lawn looked. And that, my friend, is how a spreadsheet becomes a sword. She built her empire on overdue fines and overinflated invoices, but the foundation? It cracked under the weight of one good algorithm and a neighborhood that finally said, "Enough, stick around." Because if you thought this was satisfying, wait until you see what happens when the subpoenas actually land on her doorstep. We're just getting to dessert. If you've never seen someone age 10 years in 10 minutes, I recommend attending a fraud hearing. Veronica Dalton entered the county courthouse like she always had, shoulders back, chin high, blazer so stiff it looked like it came with its own HOA violation, but this time the clipboard was missing. So was the smirk. She sat beside Hank, who looked like he'd just learned the phrase, "indictable offense" was more than just a suggestion. The judge didn't waste time. This wasn't a soapbox. It was a spreadsheet showdown with receipts. First came the video footage. Veronica, mid-sneak, mid-selfie, inside my garage, giggling while soaking her Porsche in eau de compost. The courtroom chuckled. Then came the contracts. Dalton Solutions, the shell companies, the kickbacks, every dollar mapped, every lie timestamped. When they pulled up a side-by-side of Veronica's fake bylaw approvals, her signature carbon copied across 3 different dates, the judge leaned back and muttered, "Bold." Hank tried to speak, blamed everything on administrative confusion and contractor miscommunications. The prosecutor calmly replied, "You forged 3 board signatures and deposited $78,000.00 into your own offshore account labeled Maintenance Reserve B." Veronica interjected about community beautification and emergency discretionary oversight. The judge raised a single eyebrow, the judicial equivalent of "Girl, please." Then he read the ruling. Veronica Dalton was permanently barred from holding any HOA position in the state. Hank would face a separate criminal trial for wire fraud and conspiracy. And the court ordered immediate asset recovery, starting with the infamous Porsche. Now, poetic justice is one thing, but poetic repossession? That's art. The state auctioned off Veronica's Porsche the following month. It still carried the faint scent of my signature Scent Protocol X, despite a professional detailing crew's best efforts. Tyler, the owner of Eco Scrub Auto, bought it at half-market price and parked it outside his car wash with a custom plaque, "Clean, honest, and odor-free." He told me it doubled foot traffic within a week. Tourists started taking selfies with it. There's now a local rumor that the smell intensifies when you lie on your taxes. I don't correct it. Back in Bellflower Point, the fallout was swift and, in its own way, healing. The recovered $500,000, 0 cents, plus once funneled through fake mulch projects and invisible benches, was returned to the community fund. HOA fees were cut in half, we upgraded the playground, fixed actual sidewalks, installed an irrigation system that didn't leak like a drunk fire hose, and, with some coaxing from neighbors and a guilt basket of muffins from Judy, I was elected the new HOA president. I accepted, reluctantly, cautiously, and with the promise that I'd never wear a lavender blazer to a meeting. My first act wasn't revenge. It was replacement. We scrapped the old paper system, the cryptic notices, the mail slot mystery fines. I built a digital transparency dashboard where every resident could see spending in real time, line by line, dollar by dollar. We even made it mobile-friendly. Rita helped with the legal compliance, Marcus handled security protocol, and Judy designed a flagging system for anything suspicious. It wasn't just about tracking expenses, it was about restoring trust. And in Bellflower Point, that was worth more than a clean lawn or matching shutters. Sometimes, when things quiet down and I'm on my porch with a cold drink and the sound of sprinklers that no longer trigger fines, I think about Veronica. Not out of spite, but as a reminder. She didn't just overreach, she overbelieved in a lie, that rules make a kingdom and fines make a queen, but rules without reason are just threats, in italics. And queens without integrity? They end up watching their throne get pressure-washed in front of the neighborhood they tried to control. Veronica didn't just wash her car in the wrong place. She power-washed the illusion of control, and underneath, we found truth. Quiet, messy, but finally clean. If that story made you laugh, gasp, or cheer a little inside, leave a comment below and tell us where you're tuning in from. We love hearing your thoughts, your stories, and yes, your HOA nightmares too. And if you're into tales where justice smells sweeter than Chanel No 5 on a bad day, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow, we've got another jaw-dropping story coming your way, and trust me, the surprises ahead, you won't want to miss a single one.